Hello, hello, my fellow educators. My name is Gregg Sotiropoulos from Publications. Thank you very much for joining with us today. The topic of this particular webinar is why do we teach the way we do? And in thinking about this question during these very turbulent times that we're living in, with quarantine and Rona-19 and all of this teaching that has been done out of our comfort zone, it's very important for us to take a step back and reflect on our professional development. And in talking about our professional development, we have to remember one thing, that we can be trained by other people through life, we can be educated by others, but when it comes to professional development, we cannot be developed by others. We make the conscious choice to develop ourselves as educators. As we have one of the most difficult jobs in the world, being educators, all of the pressure is on us right now on how we can engage our students. But in doing so, we have to ask ourselves, where are we right now in our careers, and what can we do to develop ourselves? I'd like to share with you a little story. When I was younger, a lot younger, I always wanted to be a basketball player. And in being a basketball player and in playing any sport in life, you have to be trained by your coaches, and you have to practice and put in a lot of time and effort and dedication. In doing so, I started playing basketball when I was 4 years old, but I wasn't very good at it. My number one fan was my mother, and she had said to me, "Greg, you know what? You don't have to believe that you have to be better than everybody else on your team. What I want you to do is believe that you have to be better than you ever thought you could be." Unfortunately, though, my career as a basketball player ended abruptly when I was in university, so I had to make a conscious choice on what was I going to do in life. In university, I was undecided. I didn't know what I wanted to do. But then, in profiling myself and trying to understand what would I be best at, a lot of teachers that I had throughout my education came into my mind. And so they helped me, they guided me to realize that the career path that I wanted to choose was to be a teacher. And so this has become my mantra, and I share this with you, my fellow educators, that I don't want us to believe that we have to be better than our colleagues, that we have to be better than other people, but rather every day that we wake up to be better than we were yesterday. And this mantra, I think that we should share it with our students, because our students are very hard on themselves. With technology and them being the wired generation, they're being given a lot of external information in which they look up at, and they feel that they have to reach that level. So in doing so, just remind them that they have to believe they have to be better than they ever thought they could be each and every day. I'd like to share with you some reflective questions in which you ask yourselves every couple of months, and it will help you in your professional development. The first is, why do you teach the way you do? So if you have a little pad next to you, which you should, because this is an amazing conference by SBS, take out your pencil, stretch out your fingers, okay, and write this down. Why do you teach the way you do? Another question that we should reflect on is, how do your students and your colleagues view you? First, as an educator, as a teacher, and second, as a human being. How do they view you? The third question, and this is a question that I find most interesting, is what kind of teacher are you? So if you can stretch out your fingers for a moment and type in the chat box, just write down, what kind of teacher are you? With one word, how can you describe yourself as a teacher? Many times when teachers reflect on this question, it's hard to pinpoint one word. Some may say that I'm energetic, kind, compassionate, that I'm a facilitator, that I'm empathic. All of these things are what make up a teacher. What are you trying to achieve for yourself and for your students? For each lesson, for each semester, in general, what are you trying to achieve? Now, this is a tricky one. What are your strengths and limitations as a language teacher? You see, it's very easy for us to understand our strengths in teaching, but we have to be able to understand also that the limitations that we have are okay. Just like each and every other teacher in our faculty, it makes us unique, those strengths that we have, the different strengths that we have, and at the same time, the limitations that we have also make us unique. How have you developed since that very first day you took a step into the classroom till today that you are here with us? Sometimes we look at it as a roller coaster. So how have you developed throughout these years? And finally, as you develop throughout the years, have you realized that there are some gaps maybe in your knowledge, in your development? If there are, then what we must do is look at those and fine-tune them and correct them. So our role as a teacher is extremely multifaceted, and many times, at least for me, I feel dazed, I feel confused, even lost, as you can see here in this picture. But in doing so, I want us to reflect a little bit and explore a personal approach that I wish to share with you towards developing ourselves through some suggested, and I repeat, suggested guiding concepts. These concepts that I'm going to share with you are things that have worked for me and for fellow colleagues. And so in fine-tuning these concepts, you may be able to also develop yourselves as a teacher. So let's jump right into it, shall we? The first guiding concept is self-awareness. And self-awareness is something that is very difficult to do because it's very different to look at ourselves in the mirror and to see what we're doing wrong, rather than looking at others and pointing the finger and saying, oh, well, you know what? Things aren't going right because of external forces. With this guiding concept of self-awareness, I'm going to offer you some tips. As Socrates said once, know thyself. And in knowing yourself, you're going to be one step closer to being able to teach more effectively. In self-awareness, we have what we call a comfort zone. And this comfort zone during quarantine, well, it's safe to say that we all broke out of our comfort zone as educators. Students even had to break out of their comfort zone. Let's not forget those parents. They did too. So don't be so comfortable in your teaching habits. Break out of that comfort zone. During quarantine, how many of you, with a show of hands or a little yes or a no in the chat box, how many of you were in bad moods? I can raise my hand and say it was very difficult emotionally during this quarantine period. And in knowing yourself and in having self-awareness, you never make a decision when you're in a bad mood. because usually it's the wrong decision. Now, what's interesting is the flip side. Even if you're in a very good mood, never make a decision. Now you're going to say to me, Greg, what are you talking about? Good, bad moods and good moods? Yes. Why? Because if you're in a very good euphoric mood, right, sometimes you're not thinking straight. And so you need to be careful with that. Okay. Keep your eye out with that. Have a bird's eye perspective. Have a bird's eye perspective of who you are teaching and how you are teaching your students. You may be in the zone when you're teaching, but let's take, for example, when you're teaching online and you have videos, the video camera's open, you have to have that bird's eye perspective of what's going on with your students. In doing so, you may have to take a step back and catch yourself and see what I'm saying and how I'm saying it. Is it actually reaching out to those who are listening to me? Never judge your personal feelings. And the reason why I put this particular dash and comment is because I have seen that through quarantine, there's been an increase in social emotional wellness, and people's personal feelings have come out in social media, in chats, and we have to be very careful with that. We have to be very careful in checking what I call our media emotions. Our media emotions are very, very sensitive right now, because what's been going on is the emotion of fear was triggered from the onset of this pandemic. And so when fear grows in the mindset of students and parents and teachers, and then we get sucked into the media frenzy, okay, because everyone was home with technology, we get bombarded with this negativity. And therefore, our emotions come out differently, and we can't think straight. Reevaluate, reinforce your values and your value system. It's time for a checkup, ladies and gentlemen, my fellow educators, and that checkup is on stress. You see, in self-awareness, it changes based on the external forces that are around us. And so during these 3, 4, 5 months of quarantine and of Rona-19, we have seen that there have been spikes of stress going on. We need to have that checkup and see what is it that is triggering these stress factors. And these triggers need to be singled out. As students have different learning styles, we as educators also have different teaching styles. So in self-awareness, we have to look at how we teach. What is that particular style that we have? So in doing that, I want to share with you the 4 teaching styles, and I want you to reflect on which of these 4 resonate with you. What is your particular teaching style? The first is a facilitator. A facilitator is one who nurtures independent learning. You may be seen as a trainer in the eyes of your students. You focus on activity-based learning. You inspire collaboration among your students, among your future global agents of change. As a facilitator, you promote reflection in your classroom. So think about that. Are you a facilitator? Is that your teaching style? How about a demonstrator? A demonstrator is one who teaches how by showing how to do it. And students, when they have a demonstrator type teacher, they use that way of teaching in learning by showing you how they interpret the information. Demonstrators guide students through the lesson They are a role model in the eyes of students. They are seen as a coach in the eyes of their students. So this is a demonstrator. So how many of you are a demonstrator in the eyes of your students? You also promote student participation. Now, the reason why this came up late is because we should be doing this no matter what our teaching style. Then there's the delegator. The delegator is one who uses a lot of project work. There's a lot of accountability towards the students. The students are the ones who are responsible for the learning process. The flipped classroom approach is used many, many times in the delegator type teaching style. You're also seen as a manager, and as a manager, you micromanage. You are able to give your students something to do in which they work together as one, but each student, because they are accountable for their particular part in the project, they have to be very careful because they may or may not be the reason why it's not successful. And so teamwork is very, very important in this particular approach. And finally, there is formal authority. Now, in formal authority, many of us will say, well, we don't do this. Where our expertise is shown, where we are seen as a lecturer, where we focus strictly on content teaching. We do not nurture student relationships because we are the ones who are the teacher. So therefore it is teacher-centered. But what's funny now is, if you write down in the chat box, which of these is your teaching style, I can bet that most of you will be saying to yourselves, well, Greg, at some point in my career, I was one of these. And that's exactly it. You see, our teaching styles should not be constant. It is impossible, and correct me if I'm wrong, that every year, every semester, when you have a new group of students, that you teach the same exact way. How can that work? Because all of those minds, those characters, those personalities that are coming into your class are different from last year, from last semester. So you need to be self-aware on who you are teaching so you can teach in a method, in a way, in a style that will connect with that particular group. Okay. All right. The next guiding concept is authenticity. Now, authenticity is one in which we invest in our personal growth. To be an authentic teacher, unique in the eyes of our students and our colleagues. In being authentic, I really wish for you to rid yourself of the naysayers. And those naysayers are the ones who say that you cannot do what you're thinking of doing, that what you're doing is not working, that what you're doing isn't a good idea, that the idea you have won't work. You see, there are a lot more naysayers now than there were years ago. And that's because the naysayers are usually the ones who are not team players. The naysayers are the ones who usually cause the issues and the problems within the educational system. Self-doubt. Self-doubt with authenticity doesn't work. It's like oil and water. Okay? Kick it to the curb. Do not doubt your talents. Do not doubt your strengths. Do not doubt your limitations. Okay? Be confident in what you do. And on that note, I wish to take a moment, a parenthesis, and just say, thank you. A sincere thank you for the job that you have done, the job you are doing right now during this transition phase, during this very, very difficult time in education globally, that you should be commended on the job you're doing, because it was not easy to go from face-to-face to quarantine learning. Because let's face it, it wasn't remote learning, it wasn't online learning, it wasn't distance learning, it was quarantine learning for a while. And so I do want to thank you. Reflect on what and who makes you feel good. And I mean really, really makes you feel good. Because those are the people who you want in your power of proximity. The power of proximity is in your circle of friends, your safety circle net. You don't want naysayers. So bring those people that make you feel good into that circle. Make amends with your friends. In being authentic, it means if you had friends that you had some problems with, because it has happened a lot during quarantine, sit back and make amends with them. Bring them back into your power of proximity. Tune into your feelings. Be available for fun. Your students want it. They need it. They deserve it in their lessons. So don't close off your authentic teaching style. Follow that intuition. Follow that gut feeling that you have inside when you teach, and go for it. Make it yours. Say what you need to say, and say it now. When you are being authentic, you are not suppressing what you're thinking, what you're feeling. When you are truly authentic, you talk about it in that moment, honestly and openly and sincerely. And that's what needs to happen now more than ever before, is for you to focus and hone on your authentic teaching style. This particular man here is one of my top 10 literary icons. His name is John Steinbeck, Jr. And I share him with you because he has some incredible quotes in which he has written. And one that resonates with me, and you can connect it with authenticity, is the following. He wrote a book of Mice and Men, one of my favorites. The reason why I bring this up is because if you haven't read it, I implore you to read it, okay? And John Steinbeck said, school is not easy, and for the most part, ladies and gentlemen, it's not very fun. But then, if you're lucky, very lucky, you may find a teacher, but maybe even 3 real teachers in a lifetime. And that's the very best of luck. And so these 3 teachers that he's talking about are those truly authentic teachers. So think for a moment on some of the teachers that you had from kindergarten all the way up to university. Do any of those teachers resonate and come to mind for a particular reason? That is part of their authenticity. You see, ladies and gentlemen, your students, they may not consider you as a role model. They may not consider you as something special in their lives now. But you take my word for it. Later on in life, something is going to hit them. Something is going to trigger a response. And they're going to say, you know what? He or she was right. He or she, wow. They did make a difference. So it may not happen now, may not happen in 2-3 years, but it will happen at some point. Because I'm sure that you are all truly authentic in your teaching. The next guiding concept is accountability. Now here's something interesting where I'm going to talk about. In being accountable, okay, we are liable or we are answerable to our actions. And our accountability as a teacher has changed throughout the years. We are accountable. We have to explain or justify something. We have to answer to a lot more than the teachers had to when we were kids. Let me explain this. You see, back when we were kids in the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, I'm dating myself, aren't I? When we went home to our parents with a bad grade, with bad behavior, our parents would look at us and say, "What are these grades? What did you do? You are accountable for your action in school. So you are not going to go out to play with your friends for a week. You're not going to watch TV. You're not going to ride your bike, your skateboard. If we want to include some video games, you're not going to use your Atari, your ColecoVision." Again, I'm dating myself. Those of you who remember those games, right? And we would say, "Oh, no, are you serious?" And you would hear your friends playing outside and you'd be studying. Why? Because you would want to get those grades up. You would want to show your parents that you can do it, that it was your fault that it didn't work. And so the accountability was on the student. But now, my fellow educators, 2010, 2015, when the student gets a bad grade, what happens? They come to us. The parents come to us with the student and says, "It's our fault. We are to blame. We are accountable for the grade." And then we ask the parents, "Does your son or daughter study?" Of course they do. They come home every day and they go inside their room for 3 hours every night. Study. Really? Have you ever checked their history bar on their Chrome or on their laptop or home computer to see where they are, what times they are logging in, and what they're doing during those 3 hours? Because let me tell you, TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, Messenger, Roblox, Fortnite, Minecraft, these are the things, especially during quarantine, what the students were doing. So our accountability is what? To help with standardized testing, to help with the state tests, to be accountable and having our students get the good grades. But then what happens? All the fun is taken out of teaching and learning. So in our development, we have to work and collaborate together and ask ourselves, what are we going to do? What are we first accountable for? For these testing, state tests and grades? Or now that quarantine has hit us like a brick, put that aside for a little bit and worry about the true needs of our students, the social-emotional needs of our students. That our students are not so in touch with the grade, but they may need some other skill sets right now that need improving, that need developing. Our accountability has grown exponentially, my fellow educators, and it is hard. It is very, very hard because we have many, many things that we must face during the year. So the question is, what should we be accountable for? So I would like you to please, as a little, let's say, take-home reflective essay. I am accountable for what? Ask yourself this, reflect on this, and write about it in your journal, if you have one. Because, as Aristotle said, one of my favorite quotes that I always refer to, education of the mind without education of the heart is absolutely no education at all. So it's in your ball. The ball is in your court. What are you going to do? Okay. going to do. You see, let me share with you a little story about a student. This student A in first grade finished first grade, and the first grade teacher wrote that student A is a bright and brilliant child with a beautiful, ready laugh. He or she does his or her work neatly, has very good manners, and is a joy to be around. This is student A. Okay, so accountability. Second grade teacher also had student A in her class. At the end of the year, she writes, student A is an excellent student. Okay, follows along with the first grade teacher's profile. Well liked by his or her classmates. But, there's a but. He or she is troubled because his or her, there's a serious issue going on at home, fill in the gap. And life at home must be a struggle. So, this same student finishes 2 grades. Okay, but see what's going on now outside of school. Third grade now, the teacher writes at the end of the year, student A's that serious issue at home that she read about from the second grade teacher has been hard on him or her. He or she tries to do his or her best, but his or her parents don't show much interest. And his or her home life will soon affect him or her if some steps are not taken. Interesting. Same student, but look at how things are changing in school. Fourth grade teacher writes, student A now is withdrawn, does not show much interest in school, doesn't have many friends, and sleeps in class. So, why am I sharing this with you? Because as we teach and we fall into the trap of having to teach a lot and running after time. During these 4 months of quarantine, we have to realize that the seriousness of what has been going on in their home setting will play a detrimental role in their effectiveness and engagement in their classes, whether online or face-to-face. And so we are accountable for something else. We are accountable to be aware and to share. And so these 4 teachers did that. At the end of the year, they shared just a little note about each student for the next year's teacher. And so that next year's teacher was able to have just a brief idea, not to get, not to have someone tell them exactly how that student is, because you want to see on your own how your class is going to be. But a little paragraph always helps, as you can see here. Okay, so be aware and share with your colleagues. This helps because our accountability is as such. The next guiding concept is the what and the how in development. And now, many times we focus too much time on what we're going to do rather than how we're going to do it. So, I want to share with you some criteria on how you can prepare for what you should do towards development. First and foremost is to collect as much information as you can on what you want to do for yourself in developing yourself as a teacher. Articulate to yourself and prioritize your expectations on what it is you want to do and how it's going to help you. Identify and assess tangible and intangible gains towards the information that you collect. Find out the skills and the background of your colleagues. Now, why is this important? Well, sometimes you can learn from your colleagues. It's not a bad thing to do that, to ask help from your colleagues. So in finding out the skills and the background, their strengths and limitations, that might help you in preparing for the what. If possible, talk to your coordinator, your director, and have all the teachers discuss collaboratively what they want to do towards their development. You see, many times a school may set up seminars and workshops for their faculty, and 3/4 of the faculty are already developed in that field. So it would be a waste of time for them. Maybe not the 25% of the other teachers, but that would mean that you have to do this discussion session to see how you can manage your workshops. And in doing so, what you're going to do is map out a plan. Okay. Now let's look at the how. How are we going to do this? We're going to prepare to assess and reveal the plan to our colleagues or to your coordinator or director. You're going to identify first your own misperceptions, prejudices, and preconceived ideas. And what is this? This is self-awareness. Okay. Distinguish persons from problems. Prepare to distinguish and deal with gaps among your colleagues, tensions, rivalries, and even synergies. And in turn, in preparing for the how, you will develop your own authenticity. Okay. To look at this visually, we are all at a starting point, and we are all at some point in our development. Okay. When we make that decision on what we want to do, the what seems like a straight, direct line. Okay. The outcome of development is over here. The how looks something like this. The how takes a lot more time, a lot more effort to put through, to go through. And so we may say to ourselves, okay, I know what I want to do, but the how is difficult because of barriers that we face throughout our development, throughout the start and finish of what we want to do. Okay. The next guiding concept is something that some teachers they argue in a very friendly manner that it's very difficult to do this. You see, journal writing, I consider this a concept in development because it is truly one of the boulevards, one of the avenues to self-awareness. Have you ever written down your thoughts about lessons that you have taught or will teach? Do you have journals? I'm just curious. I must have roughly 300-400 journals because I've been in education for almost 25 years. And so my mentor when I was in university told me about this. So I started 25 years ago. And do I have all of them right now? Maybe half of them. Have I reflected on them? Have I gone back to read some of them? Absolutely. Has it helped? Incredibly. You see, journal writing will help us to solve problems, to be proactive instead of reactive. You know, problems arise again in a different form, but with an underlying similarity. So if you think about it, we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them or when they were created. It makes sense. So I would say to you that, or I'd rather suggest to you that another homework assignment would be to get your journals ready and to start next week in journal writing. And now, the final guiding concept is one that is very, very important for us to discuss. And that is teacher burnout. Now, this lovely seasoned teacher, educator, not only is very hot and wants to put the window open, but is somewhat considering teacher burnout. Is she going to jump out the window? Probably not. Well, some of the students may say, whew, push her. No. But the thing is, how many of us, honestly, have felt like this sometimes? How many of us have really been tested during the past 4 and 5 months? I know I have, in every sense of the word, as a professional, as a son to my mother, and as a father to my children. I have been tested and I have been burnt out. Not to the point where I say I give up. And that being said, it means that there are stages of teacher burnout. Day after day, we're doing or feeling the same thing. So stage 1 is rigidity, closed off to advice, that we say, no, I don't want to hear what you have to say. I know what I'm doing. Self-neglect may begin. Aesthetically, we may be unprepared, taking care of basic health, ignoring warning signs, insisting that they are fine, despite subtle stressors, changes in our attitude, our character, our demeanor. Probably we have all been through stage 1 at some point in our career. Okay. At some point. I know I was in stage 1 during quarantine. Okay. In stage 2, we look at things a little bit differently. We are irritable. Anger management. Our moods change. Now, remember what I said about good and bad moods? Our moods do change. And we need to have that checkup for stress, because stress is what triggers these irritability and anger management symptoms. Emotional self-regulation, sleep deprivation, eating habits, failure to adhere to routines, enhancing negative feelings. Wait a minute. Routines and habits. How many of us have changed our routines because of quarantine? How many of us have changed our habits? Not all of them, but there was a change. How many of us have had some negative feelings? Keep them in check, my fellow educators, because then comes stage 3. And that is total and utter emotional exhaustion, which may or may not lead to career failure. The lead cause of failing teacher performance is that they are at this point where they just say, I can't anymore. This drives teacher turnover. Now, 2 other things happen here. Teachers are burnt out, but coordinators, directors, principals don't see it. They don't accept it. They keep them. Big mistake. Because who pays the price? In the little chat box, who pays the price? That's right. Our future global agents of change, our students. Mental, physical, emotional exhaustion. All of this comes into play. And so sometimes teachers don't make the conscious decision and say, it's a hard decision to say, I'm tired, I can't. I need a break. Take a sabbatical. Take a year, take 2 years. But that is what is important, because the students are the ones who are going to pay the price. Being stuck and unable to improve, unable to develop. You are just closed off. So, grapes must be crushed to make wine, correct? Yes. Diamonds form under pressure. Olives are pressed to do what? To release a wonderful extra virgin olive oil. Some seeds do actually grow in darkness. Whenever you feel crushed, my friends, whenever you feel under pressure, pressed, or in darkness, you are in a powerful place of transformation. So, trust yourself. You got this. There are many of you online with me right now that I've probably met. Many of you that I haven't, and I hope that in the future I get to meet you. But remember that no matter how hard it is, you must look at what is in front of you, not as something that is going to push you back and not allow you to move forward, but use it as something in which you can transform and transition and move ahead. So, as a recap, we have self-awareness, authenticity, accountability, the what and the how, journal writing, teacher burnout, and avoiding it. Okay, these are the concepts that I shared with you. Reflect on them, put your little authentic twist on them, and I hope that they help. Fellow teachers, remember to be better than you ever thought you could be. Keep working hard, keep learning, keep sharing, keep inspiring, keep motivating those future global agents of change. Thank you very, very much for your time, for your commitment, and for your dedication.